Hey, good morning everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss Pre-Market Report for October 4th, 2016. I am Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. Right now we are chopping between 21.35 quarter and basically 21.72. That's been our range here recently over the last 2+ weeks, and really we still continue to coil within that larger trading range here. And all eyes perhaps are on the non-farm payroll number that comes out later on this week before the open on Friday. So we could be looking at further back and forth activity ahead of that number before we see expansion. But again, this has been a developing range for some time now. We have many months here of sideways action with one basically 2-day pullback, and that's about it. And eventually we will see some nice movement from this range, but until right now it could be just this way for the next 4 or 5 weeks until the election. So right now, very indecisive trading range up here, very modest range, not a whole lot of facilitation to trade on a swing basis. But intraday is a different story. Intraday, there's been some decent moves to be had. We've seen some great moves materialize here over the recent days and weeks inside the range, and right now what we're seeing is just a little bit of chop here, back and forth around that 58.5. Here's the previous week's close price. That's the most important level right now, and that's 21.5675. It's clean support here, went offered, resistance. Now it's tried to hold back above it and failed. So right now, bears are doing a good job of defending prices above the previous week's close, and eventually that would imply perhaps a move into the previous week's low price, which is as low as 21.32. So if prices can't remain above the previous week's close, and especially above the previous session's close, we could be looking at a push first to 21.4675, followed by the potential to see a full-on move into 32 to 35. Right now we have a 100% bear target at 21.37. So based off of the high of the day, an average daily range move would take you into 21.37 at the moment. But again, anything back above 21.58s here could be important, because again, you start to push toward the opposite end of the range, and that would be 21.68. All right, let's take a look here at crude oil. Here's crude in the daily time frame. We have our weekly PivotBoss pivots. The key level we've been watching is 48s. That's the major level we've been watching in the room. And price right now is holding above 48s for the first time since way back in the middle of August. So this is when we last saw price above it, and when price failed to hold above that level. So you had the day where price pushed all the way through, then you had the digestion day above it, and then the stops came out, and then it rejected back below it. Every attempt after that was absorbed, and then you saw weakness. That's how it looked the prior time. The time before that, very similar. Here, offered, retest, also absorbed, and then it continued downward. So we could see that type of behavior again if there's a major selling pressure through those 48s. You could see a clear down moving or downtrending day. That is a stops run day right there, and that would then signal something like this that may come. Not forecasting all the way back to here, but you could see a return back to value 45.60 with a shot to reach recent lows between 43 and 44. So that could be quite a little bit of a move here, but it all kind of depends on these 48s. If price is able to hold above 48s for several days, we could be looking at a move to the other end of the range at 51.67. But right now the key zone to watch 48, and if there's any rejection above that zone, we could be looking at a move back toward value 45.60 very quickly. All right, let's take a look at the intraday time frame. Here it is. Here's the intraday time frame. Right now what I notice is that the previous session and the close is being offered right now. So the previous session's close is offered, and every rotation into that area right now being defended by bears. You also see here a period where you're seeing a pattern of higher lows come into play. That could be a rounded bottom there. With all the bears kind of selling at the same spot, you have all of the buy stops at the same area above 48.70. You have higher lows here. So this could be an opportunity where a push above 48.70 runs the stops to new highs into 49.02, and perhaps into the 25% expansion for the day at 49.33. So that could be a nice little move here if price can establish itself above 48.70, because there are some buy stops above that zone, and this pattern of higher lows here and a rounded bottom points that we could see a move like that materialize. I'd be looking to 49.30 to 49.35 for that upside target. Now, if there's any failure to hold here above the previous week's high here, which is the 48.32, that's the important level. So you can see the previous week's high price right here, previous week's close is here. So right now, those are the two levels that are in play. Our 48s is here. So that's the ultimate level here. Any failure to hold above the previous close would suggest a drive right into 48.05 for a retest and that 48 zone. So right now, there's a couple of plays to watch for. Are the stops going to get run above 48.70 into those 49s, or is there going to continue to be rejections at this level, which would forecast a move into 48 to 48.05? That's the idea right now. One of those edges is going to get tested, and it all depends on what's going to happen here at the previous close. Okay, let's take a look now at gold here. This is gold futures. We saw a major sell-off. Here's the intraday time frame. Let's take a look at the higher time frame here with the weekly PivotBoss pivots. What we were looking for here was a continuation downward into 13.05 to 13.10. I mentioned before that the first idea is for bulls to look to defend that area until proven otherwise. And right now it's clear that the stops have been run through that zone. Very clear that the midpoint is also where the recent lows are, and that tells you that perhaps the range could be in for the day. But we did reach our target zone, and this is after price broke below these 3-day lows. I mentioned these 3-day pattern here suggests that if we break down below here, we could drop right into 1300, 1305, 1305, 1310. I kept adjusting the little zone, and you can see that we finally made it there. There was one time here where we had a push above the previous highs, and rejecting those highs in a downtrend gave us further confirmation that we were likely going lower. And now we've done so. But what I've mentioned before is if price can't hold above 1300 and stay above that zone, there could be a major transition here between price distributions. You have 1380 down to 1310, and then you have the 1310 down to 1208s. And so to fail to hold 1310 would suggest eventually a move back toward 1208, and then perhaps a bounce back up. So right now we could be looking at a significant move downward if prices remain below 1300, and if there begins to see acceptance below that zone, because that would suggest a transition first to value and then across the previous price distribution. So that could be significant. If price were to push back above 1310 and hold, and then all of a sudden you see a rejection tail develop, then at that point we may look for an absorption signature that perhaps brings us back up within the range. Right now we got to see how price in the market plays around that 1300. Okay, let's take a look here at the NQ. NQ, nothing really to say on a weekly perspective for swing trading basically. In the daily chart, you're just seeing further trading range action from 48.90 down to about 4800, just back and forth in the upper portion of this range. 48.20 has been a key level for us, but it hasn't been, it's more of a fuzzy pivot right now, where it's a little bit below it, a little bit above it, but it's still generally the pivot to watch. I think 4800 and that FOMC level here at 4804 are perhaps the better pivots here to watch. And so any failure to hold that zone could transition this thing back across the range with targets along the way. But right now we could be range bound, at least short term, heading into the NFP report. So I'd be watching the previous week's high here, and that's about 48.85, right on the money. And that's the level to watch, because if price comes into the zone and there can't, additional follow through is not seen, then that rejection there could be a failed range expansion that leads price back across the range right into this sweet spot here. Because remember, we're at the top of the trading range, and if we're trading range bound, at some point we're going to start making our way back toward the bottom. So watch for that intra week here, and we'll see how this continues to develop. So Bringing that into the intraday time frame. Here we are. You can see the previous high is currently off, or the previous close currently bid, but it's much higher where the key opportunity lies, which is 48.85.5. That's the previous week's high right here. So if price were to come up here and fail to establish acceptance, that could be a quick move back to value, 5-day value being 48.61, followed by the opportunity to fade this thing into 48.40 and then 48.00 to 48.05 down below. So it could be a nice swing move. So the quick day trade or scalp could be from rejection back to value. The longer term day trade could be bringing it across value, and then the swing trade could be bringing it down to 48.05. All right, so we'll see how that plays out as we head into the rest of the session. All right, good luck and trade well.